Hear your favorite NFL legends sharing their stories and insights every week right here on Thursday Night Tailgate with Chris Mascaro and Bob Lazari. Take it away, guys.
There's no way out.
All right, now back with us and making his fourth appearance on the show is former Lions and Cowboys Pro Bowl kicker Eddie Murray. Let me give you some more background on Eddie. He is from Halifax, Nova Scotia, played his college ball at Tulane, where he set the record for most points by a kicker, most field goals made, most extra points, and highest field goal percentage. And in 1987, he was inducted into their Athletics Hall of Fame. He was a seventh-round draft pick by the Detroit Lions in 1980, and he played in the league from 1980 to 2000 for the Lions, Cowboys, Redskins, Chiefs, Vikings, Eagles, and Bucks. He was selected to the Pro Bowl twice, in 1980 and 1989. He was also selected as a part of the Team of the Decade for the 1980s. Over the course of his career, he made 76% of his field goals, 99% of his extra points, and even punted 5 times for an average of 38 yards. He still ranks 18th all-time in points scored with just under 1,600 and 17th in all-time field goals made. And we're excited to have him back with us tonight here on Thursday Night Tailgate. Hey, Eddie, Chris, and Bob, thanks for coming back on the show.
Welcome back, Eddie.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, Bob. I appreciate you inviting me back on.
So, Eddie, I want to go back to sort of the beginning of your time in college, and you've got a very interesting story about how you ended up at Tulane. Talk about how a kid from Halifax, Nova Scotia, and who grew up in Victoria, British Columbia, made his way to Tulane.
Well, I mean, you got to realize that at that time, it's 1976. There's no computers, there's no internet, there's no anything like that going on. I had actually moved to Victoria from Portsmouth, England. My father was a career naval officer in the Canadian Navy, spent 25 years in the Navy, but he was English. And so he spent World War II and Korean War, and with Canada being part of the Commonwealth, he happened to just be in the Canadian Navy, even though he was British. And I spent 10 years from 5 to 15 living in England, and as you'd mentioned at the beginning, I was born in Halifax, Nova Scotia, when he was based there. And when he passed away when I was 14, my mother moved me to Victoria. And I spent my high school years mostly there. And I was actually out of high school for a year working in a lumber yard and playing football till like there was a league I could play in till I was 21. And my coach said, hey, the BC Lions are having a development camp on the island. I think you should attend. And I said, well, what could come of it if I go to it? And he said, well, you could maybe get invited to their main camp in Vancouver and maybe get a chance to go play in college. So I attended. I was invited to go to the camp in Vancouver when Cal Murphy was the head coach for the BC Lions at the time. And I attended the camp when I was over there. And at the end of the camp, they had a inter-squad scrimmage because the camps they had at that time were full contact camps. And so, they just kind of split the camp up into half and somewhat of a controlled scrimmage. And, yeah, there were some coaches there. Simon Fraser had some coaches there, UBC. There was, I think, Portland State, some of the schools around the Washington State area. And at halftime, we didn't go to locker rooms. We just kind of walked to the sidelines and just rested for a little bit. And Coach Murphy came up to me and said, hey, are you the kid from Victoria that I heard that could kick? And I said, yeah, I was. So he said, well, let's get a snapper and a holder. I want to see you kick. So we got a snapper and a holder, and we started snapping some extra points, and I was kicking, and we moved from hash to hash and moving back. And as I'm doing it, the rest of the players were kind of like horseshoeing around me, kind of, yelling and screaming and hooting and hollering. And I finally missed when I got back to about 52 yards. And I went like 3 out of 5 from over 50. And Coach Murphy said, okay, Ed, thanks. I appreciate that. All right, let's get back to the scrimmage. So we finished the scrimmage. I was in the showers, came back out. One of Coach Murphy's assistants says, hey, Coach wants to talk to you. So I went to his office after dressing, and he said, Ed, that was pretty impressive. putting you on the spot right away. You're not knowing that I was going to do this, and then with everybody yelling and screaming, I was pretty impressed. In fact, I'd like to invite you to a training camp. Would you like to go? And I said, well, sure, why not? So I went back home, and unfortunately at that time my mother was dying of cancer. So I went back home and saw her in hospital and told her about how well I had done, and she was real proud of me and everything. And so I went back home and just went back to my life, getting ready to go to camp. And it was the same year John Shearer was the first pick for the BC Lions, and it was also Louis Passaglia's rookie year. So while I was getting ready for camp to roll around, I started getting calls and messages left because I would, I'd get up, I'd go to work and come home and go see my mom at hospital, and that was kind of like my life at that time, was just kind of a rotating back, going to work on the hospital, and come back home, go to bed, get up and go to work. And I started getting this call from this Willard Wells from Tulane University, and I never knew of Tulane University, and of course, like I said, I couldn't Google it and find out where it was. So he happened to catch me one time, and he said, hey, I'm an assistant coach, and I'm at Tulane University. I understand, you're going to camp with the BC Lions, and do you have any interest in going to college? And I said, well, yeah, I kind of do, but, I've made a commitment to Coach Murphy that I would go to camp. And so I did. I went to camp to Penticton, and it just was not a good fit, just to perfectly put it honestly. It wasn't good for me. I wasn't big enough. I mean, back then, 1976, rosters were like 33 men, 35, I think, and, you had to play both ways kind of thing, and you couldn't be just a kicker. You had to play another position, and I just could not handle it. So, actually, Coach Murphy was a good friend of Coach Wells. They actually coached together at San Jose State together, and Coach Wells was from Powell River, British Columbia, and he got let go at San Jose, got hired on as an assistant at Tulane, and on his way home he stopped off in Vancouver before he had to move his family to New Orleans, and ran into Coach Murphy, decided to go see him, and Coach was looking at film of me kicking at halftime. So if that circumstance and those roads didn't cross, I might still be back in Victoria driving that forklift in a lumberyard. So it was the biggest break of my life. I always said, things kind of happen, for a reason, and it was a blessing that I had the opportunity at that time that Tulane kind of fell across me like they did. They brought me down on a recruiting trip, and I signed with them and went back home. And about 30 days later, unfortunately, my mother passed away before I went to college, and so she didn't get a chance to see me play in college. But she was real proud of the fact that I had a chance to go and at least get a degree and get a chance to play football in college.
And Eddie, I also read that when you left Tulane after your time there, you were a first-round draft pick of the Hamilton Tiger Cats in the CFL, and their draft was about a month before the draft in the NFL. Obviously, like I said in your intro, you were drafted in the 7th round by the Lions. Yep. Talk about making the decision to go to the Lions. What were you thinking between that 30 days in between the CFL draft as a first-round pick and then the NFL draft as a 7th-round pick?
Well, it's kind of a funny story with that. I know when I was selected, it made news back in Victoria, and I actually got a call from our sports information director at Tulane at the time, a guy named M.L. Lagarde. He says, hey, the Victoria Times columnists are calling up and they want to interview you. And I said, well, what about? I said, the draft hasn't come. And he said, well, apparently they said that you were the first-round pick in the Canadian draft by the Hamilton Tiger Cats. And I said, wow, I haven't heard anything. Really? Are you sure? And he said, apparently you are, so you might want to give him a call. So I did, and they confirmed that I was. And I said, well, I was honored to be the first-round pick by Hamilton. I'll look forward to talking with them. And a couple of more days go by, and I'm thinking I'm going to be getting a call from the Tiger Cats. So I call my sports information guy again at ML, and I said, hey, can you find the number for the Tiger Cats for me so I can call them to see, what I need to do, or, am I to go anywhere? Or so he did, and I called up. I do not recall who I talked to. I remembered I asked for, the pro personnel guy there, and whoever I talked to there was not the pro personnel person. They were just someone kind of answering the phone, and they said, oh, yeah, that's right. We're going to be giving you a call here soon and start negotiations with you. I did not get that call. I never heard from the Tiger Cats. I never heard anything about them trying to
really
have me go to Hamilton. Nothing. I did not hear anything. I just assumed they assumed that I was going to be playing in the NFL or take the chances of going there. But I never got a call from the Hamilton Tiger Cats at all in regards to maybe considering playing in the Canadian League.
So you're a first-round draft pick, and they never call you?
No,
crazy.
I never got a call. No, never did.
Wow.
But again, we got to, the era was different back then. It was, again, 1970, that would be 1980, that the draft was going on. So, things were different back then. And, I know there was some conversation. I was asked, hey, if I was, interested in playing in the Canadian League or playing in the NFL. And I remembered saying I had more of a preference at that time to playing the NFL, but being a Canadian, it would be great if I had that opportunity.
Bob, questions for Eddie?
Eddie, it's always a pleasure to speak with you. And I wanted to talk about your rookie year in Detroit because I'd have to do some research, Eddie, but you led the league in field goal attempts and field goals made as a rookie. I don't know how many times in history that's made, but it can't be many. But I was just wondering, like in training camp that year, Eddie, did you have a chance or did you have the idea that you would have so many scoring opportunities? This was a team with Danielson, Billy Sims, etc. Had some talent on that offense. Started off at 5-1 that year. So your thoughts on that rookie season?
Well, I know the expectations with having drafted the Heisman Trophy winner Billy Sims in the first round, and he was the first pick of the draft that year. They were really high on our offense being definitely better than they were the year before. I know they had the worst record because of having the first pick. They were 2-14. So I know the expectations were really high that we would have a pretty potent offense. And they had a pretty decent passing game at that time. That we had David Hill, we had Freddie Scott, we had Leonard Thompson. We had some great complementary running backs in Rick Kane and Ken Callicutt, Horace King, Dexter Bussey. So we felt pretty good that we were going to be putting some points up on the board. And for me, I just kind of coattails with the opportunities that we had. And it seemed like we were getting a lot of field goal attempts. I think if I remember right, I was like 28 or 42. Percentage wasn't as great as it could have been, but we were getting a lot of chances. And, consequently, like you said, I led the league in not only field goals made, but attempted. And, unfortunately we didn't make the playoffs because we lost out to Tampa the last game of the year. But we had a really exciting offense at that time, and definitely brought some good feelings to the city and to the fans compared to the year before.
And Eddie, you kicked 12 years indoors at the Silver Dome, and we've had other kickers on this show, and they actually prefer to kick outdoors. Did you like the controlled conditions, Eddie? I'm sure in certain weather, obviously, it was an advantage, but when you got outdoors, were you really happy?
Oh, I'm like the other kickers. I prefer a nice wind, warm, grassy field than being indoors later in the year. Of course, it was nice, and especially playing in Detroit, where you could have those cold and inclement weather games sometimes. But yeah, it was always nice to get out on some grass and to have the sun on your face and the wind at your back if you had it as a kicker. It was a nice situation to come to Detroit and to have those great years at the old Civil Dome.
And Eddie, when I think of the Detroit Lions, one of the things that immediately comes to mind, right, are Thanksgiving Day games. And I love that you can count on the Lions playing every Thanksgiving Day. I think that's a great thing. I know some people wish that we could get more variety. I don't. I'd love to count on the Lions and the Cowboys are going to be playing somebody on Thanksgiving Day. It's sort of a nostalgic thing. And you played in,
it's a nice
12 for the Lions, a couple more for the Cowboys. Did you like playing on Thanksgiving, or at one point were you like, can a brother get a Thanksgiving Day off sometime?
Well, I liked it because of the tradition. I mean, it had been a staple for the NFL to have the Lions playing on Thanksgiving, and I know it was an honor to be involved in some pretty exciting games on Thanksgiving, and I know for me, I enjoyed it because unfortunately the Lions, might not have been the strong team compared to other teams, but for us it was nice to be on national TV for people to get to see us, and we took a lot of pride in being able to show our wares on Thanksgiving and try to put a good product out there and have people enjoy a good game on Thursday, and then have a chance for them to just sit back and enjoy a good meal.
Eddie, just a couple more before we let you go. 1993, you joined the Cowboys and were a part of their Super Bowl championship team. You make 3 field goals in that game against the Bills. After all those years of not making the playoffs in Detroit, what was it like getting your opportunity to play in a Super Bowl?
It was very exciting. I mean, they were a phenomenal team with winning the Super Bowl the year before. And then to go back again, it was a great thrill for me. It was an honor to be on their team at that time, and for us to have, a great game like we did. We played a much better second half than first half, and really put the Bills to bed pretty quickly in the second half. And to have a Super Bowl win as an NFL player is really the pinnacle why you play for. And I wish it said Detroit on the ring, but I'm just as proud to have a Dallas Cowboys Super Bowl ring on and to be a part of that great team.
And Eddie, I got to ask you the question: how often are you confused with Baseball Hall of Famer Eddie Murray?
I do get autograph requests sent to me for signing cards, and every now and again I will get an Eddie Murray card. They get confused of which one's which, but I do get it now and again. It's kind of funny. I know, and while he was playing, of course, with most of his years with Baltimore, of course, he played here in Detroit at the old Tiger Stadium, and there was some people that we both knew that were trying to get us together, and it just never worked out. But I do get confused every now and again with people sending me requests for him to sign his card.
So, Eddie, what are you doing now? Remind our listeners what you do now.
I actually work for a nonprofit, a Michigan-based nonprofit. It's called Hope Network. They're about 53 years old. About $140 million nonprofit that we deal in mental health. We deal with trying to give people a better quality of life. And we have a really good autism program also with early diagnosis. And we have a really aggressive reading program that we're getting into a lot of the schools here in the Michigan area. So it's a Michigan-based company. We have about 2,700 employees. I've been involved with them for about 7 years now. I was on their foundation board for 6. And Phil Weaver, our CEO, offered me an opportunity to come on board and to be an employee of theirs to help them raise funds, which I didn't hesitate at all. And over the past year, I've been working for Hope Network full time, and had to resign my board position with them. But I've been very passionate with their mission, and I'm honored to be a part of their team.
So, Eddie, how can our listeners stay up to date with all the things you're doing, whether it's online or over social media?
Well, I'm not very social media savvy. I don't have a website. I don't have a Twitter. I don't have a Facebook. I don't have anything. The only thing I'm on is LinkedIn. I do private lessons with high school kids, trying to help them get some scholarships with some of the kids here in the Detroit area. And some of the kids have been good enough when they've gone on to college. I've worked with them and try to help them in their pro career get placed. But still have a passion for football, still have a passion to help out kickers out there. And like I said, I have a passion for mental health and with working with Hope Network.
Well, Eddie, thank you so much for coming back on the show. It's great catching up with you again tonight. We hope you'll come back on much sooner next time.
Absolutely. I'd love to. And my best to Bob. And it's always a pleasure being on your show.
Thank you so much,
Eddie. Thank you so much. All the best to you and your family, my friend.
Thanks for having me. Take care. Cheers.
That's former Lions and Cowboys Pro Bowl kicker Eddie Murray. And I tell you, Bob, it seemed like forever the Lions had two kickers, Eddie Murray and Jason Hanson, who it seemed like they were there for 100 years. And what a great career Eddie had. And I remember, so many Thanksgivings watching Eddie Murray kick for the Detroit Lions, and how nostalgic, what a thrill it was. And he's a wonderful guy. Great to have him back on the show.
Both of those kickers you mentioned, Chris, were so incredibly talented. And Murray, when you talk about possible Hall of Fame kickers, Chris, this is a guy that made over 75% of his kicks, 350 field goals in a different era, Chris. And he just did not get as many opportunities as maybe some of the better teams. Yeah, he had a lot in his rookie season, but after that, it's kind of slim picking some year. But let me give you one stat. In 88 and 89, Chris, it's 40 out of 42 field goals. I don't know if that could be topped in two seasons percentage-wise by any kicker that's ever kicked.
Yeah, no kidding. What a great stat that is. All right, folks, we've got our next guest hanging on the line, Tony Collins. We'll get to Tony on the other side of this quick station break.